everyone, I'm Lorraine Driscoll and you're watching Building Better Brains, where each week we explore the root causes of learning and behavioral challenges so that your child can feel like a confident, happier kid and you can feel like the amazing mom that you are. This week's topic is understanding how reading ability can be impacted if your child did not crawl or if they only crawled for a short period of time. For a lot of parents, this can come as a huge surprise. When Sheila came to see me seeking reading therapy for her son Kyle, she was skeptical when she learned that reading therapy was not going to be the traditional tutoring that she had imagined. It's normal for parents to think their child just needs extra practice, or that whole concept of practice makes perfect. For most of us, practice makes perfect is the only concept we've been taught on how to improve learning, reading, or whatever the case may be. Practice makes perfect is practically a cult. So of course practice is necessary, but not if the wrong connections are in place. Then we're just reinforcing bad connections. That's how bad habits start. Like many parents, Sheila expected straightforward phonics drills and practice and extra reading. I explained that if that had worked, which he was already doing at home with Kyle, he likely wouldn't be at a standstill in total all-out gridlock and still reading at a grade 1 reading level in grade 4. When I explained the processes and developmental milestones that are needed to be able to learn how to read, Sheila began to see not only why her son was struggling, but why it was first necessary to develop and strengthen the areas of the brain that was making it difficult for Kyle to be able to learn how to read. So extra practice comes later when the weak connections that prevent a child from reading and learning well are strengthened, so that learning is no longer an uphill battle. Learning and reading can definitely be a struggle. Reading or learning in general can be a struggle, but it shouldn't be absolute torture, and it shouldn't prevent your child from being at the same level as their peers. So one of the first questions I ask at screenings are, did your child crawl, and for how long did they creep? As parents, we think of these early movements as cute, amusing, an indication that our child is developing normally, right? When they skip certain milestones or go through them really quickly, we think, they're making great progress. We take it as a sign that our child is actually ahead of the game. I know as a young mother, I did this mistake as well. What we don't realize is that those early movements are crucial for developing the sensory motor system, also known as the lower brain levels. So the lower brain levels is the first area of the brain to develop, and it is literally the foundation for higher learning, just like you have a foundation for a home. Crawling itself has many purposes for brain development, one of them being it strengthens communication between the left and right hemispheres of the brain. So the corpus callosum, which is in the middle of those two hemispheres, joins the left and right sides of the brain. When it is thick, there is strong communication between the two sides of the brain. Brain scans have revealed that individuals who have high IQs, or even just individuals who do well academically, have a thick corpus callosum, and it'll be thin when there's dementia, learning delays, learning disabilities, and so forth. So when it is not strong, the two sides have difficulty sharing information and communicating well. The result is a disorganized brain. Information just doesn't get processed or stored properly, and we see this with dyslexia and reading disorders, where reading occurs on the right side of the brain rather than where it should be in the language center, which is found on the left side of the brain. So creeping and crawling helps to develop those lower brain levels. It's absolutely crucial. So when those levels are weak or underdeveloped, there are going to be difficulties in the areas of learning, attention, and behavior. And I will talk more about attention and behavior next week. While traditional tutoring is great for children who have strong sensory motor systems but simply truly just need extra reinforcement, reading therapy is about addressing the root cause of why your child is not learning or reading at the same level as their peers despite their efforts. So reading therapy is specifically for developing those lower brain levels, the sensory motor system, strengthening weak connections in the brain, and correcting why some kids have learning difficulties. So a few of the many areas this approach involves are targeted exercises that improve eye tracking and hand-eye coordination to improve poor visual processing, crossover exercises, right, that improve communication between the left and right sides of the brain so that a child is reading from the left side of the brain where the language center is. And crawling is a crossover exercise. That's the first crossover exercise that, well, creeping is, and then crawling is the first crossover exercise that babies do. Development of core muscles. So this impacts the brain's ability to focus, coordinate the eyes for reading, and even being able to sit still. So parents often ask how these exercises are supposed to help their child with letter reversals, phonemic awareness, sounding out words, and reading comprehension. Think of movement therapy as physio for the brain. So different muscle groups and body movements and coordinated body movements are responsible for developing and activating the lower brain levels, so the higher order skills in the brain can be optimal. If those higher order brain levels need to do the job of the lower brain levels because they're weak, they can't do their job. So around 95% of the children I see in clinic either never crawled or only for a brief time. And when screening them, I literally have them crawl down the hallway, yep, even when they're 16. And it should come as no surprise that most times the more underdeveloped the crawl, the more compromised is their ability to read, learn, focus, or even behave. So skipping developmental milestones like crawling is actually quite common among children with ADHD, autism spectrum, learning disabilities, and so forth, and it has been documented for decades. Developing or developmental milestones like creeping and crawling and then walking and other more sophisticated movements develop the core muscles and the vestibular system, also known as balance and coordination. So when the vestibular system is not fully developed, it's going to affect much more than balance. It can lead to weak hand-eye coordination, as well as poor attention. Weak hand-eye coordination can hinder the eye's ability to effectively track words and to remain on target, which is why some kids continuously lose their place when reading and they have to follow with their finger. So it can also impair the ability to decode and can contribute to poor penmanship, as well as those as weak fine and gross motor skills that we so often see in dyspraxia and dysgraphia. So the function of the vestibular system is further developed and maintained through regular exercise. We all know that most children in general are not getting enough movement today. Even when crawling does occur, not continuing regular and varied movement through infancy and into early childhood can also contribute to weak connections and underdevelopment. So also, if children are just disinterested, we often see this with certain children on the spectrum. If they're disinterested in or lack regular movement, they will be more vulnerable to a reading disorder, among other types of child disorders as well. It may seem hard to believe that the core muscles can really have that kind of effect on reading skills, so allow me to explain. When core muscles are weak, every other muscle in the body will have compromised coordination, and that includes the eye muscles. So when core muscles are strengthened, eye coordination, eye tracking, and scanning can improve greatly. Strong core muscles improves balance and hand-eye coordination. That's the bottom line. Children often will complain if they do have weaknesses in these areas and they're having reading difficulties. They'll be the ones complaining that the letters blur, they move, they bounce around. I recently had a client who, after strengthening his core muscles, had marked improvement, much to his mother's happiness. He had a marked improvement in his ability to sit still and to focus. And most importantly, it eliminated his letter reversals by 50%. So we corrected the remaining reversals with vision and visual processing exercises. To say his mother, who was once skeptical, was both overjoyed and surprised would be an understatement. When I first meet with children who have reading disorders, I am less concerned with testing their reading level. So definitely I do that. It gives a baseline. I'm not saying don't do that. But what I am more concerned with is screening for things like vestibular function, core muscle development, as well as tons of other coordinated muscle or movements. Because if the brain is disorganized, there's going to be problems. So this is because if the vestibular system or core muscles are weak, the eyes will have difficulty tracking and remaining fixed on a target, as I mentioned. So extra practice like tutoring is fantastic for kids who need just that, but when reading difficulties that are really stubborn are present, usually the body and brain need exercises to strengthen weak and underdeveloped areas of the brain and the body. To learn more about how you can help your child rise above reading difficulties, hop onto my website and take the quiz to find out what exactly is at the root of your child's struggles, and check out my YouTube channel where you will find tons of tips and tricks to improve learning and behavior. Thanks for listening.